In the frozen bowels of the citadel, where chains sang dirges to the indifferent stone, a woman's voice became the fragile thread between savagery and soul. Isolde Fairwind moved through the labyrinthine corridors like a ghost unbound, her footsteps muffled by the perpetual hush of snow-laden winds that seeped through ancient cracks in the mountain's heart. At 29, she bore the weight of rejection like a cloak woven from thorns. Cast out from her pack 3 winters past, when her intended alpha had scented weakness in her quiet spirit and severed their bond before the moon could witness it. No grand betrayal, no ritual exile under howling skies, just a whispered dismissal in the great hall, her belongings thrust into her arms as the pack turned away, their eyes averted from the Omega who could not summon the fire of fury. She had wandered the blizzards of the northern wilds until the Citadel's recruiters found her, half frozen in a drift, and offered purpose in exchange for silence, guardianship over the beast. The air grew thicker as she descended, heavy with the metallic tang of rust and despair, the walls glistening with frost that never melted. Torchlight flickered in iron sconces, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the uneven stone. Isolde's breath clouded before her, each exhale a testament to the chill that clawed at her bones, seeping through her woolen cloak and the thin shift beneath. She carried a lantern in one hand, its flame a timid golden heart against the encroaching dark, and in the other, a pitcher of water drawn from the sacred spring above. Clear as moonlight, they said, though she had long ceased to believe in such graces. The citadel sprawled beneath the silver peaks, a fortress hewn from ice-veined granite, where the High Council ruled with fists of law and fangs of ambition. War had scarred these halls deeper than any blade. Whispers spoke of betrayals in the council chambers, of alphas turned to weapons in the name of victory. And at the nadir, in the deepest vault, lurked the one they called the Beast, a feral alpha whose rage had claimed lives in crimson torrents, his mind shattered by the council's own alchemical horrors. No one knew his true name anymore. To speak it was to invite the madness that had devoured him. Isolde's task was simple, they told her. Sit beyond the bars from dusk till dawn, offer sustenance through the slot, and ensure he did not breach his bonds. Speak if you must, to soothe the storm within, but never enter. Never look too long. She had accepted without protest, for what else remained to an Omega adrift. Her pack's rejection had hollowed her, leaving a void where dreams of matehood and motherhood once bloomed. In the wilds, she had learned to survive on solitude, gathering herbs under lunar glow and murmuring to the winds as if they might answer. Here, in this pit of echoes, she found a mirror to her own exile, a creature chained not just by iron, but by the ghosts of what he had been. The final gate loomed, a slab of reinforced oak bound in silver runes that hummed faintly against her palm as she pressed the key into the lock. The mechanism groaned, protesting the intrusion, and beyond it lay the chamber, a cavernous cell carved from the mountain's core, its floor scattered with straw matted by old blood. Chains dangled from the walls like frozen serpents, thick as a man's wrist, etched with wards to dull an alpha's strength. The air here was stagnant, laced with the musk of unwashed fur and the faint, acrid bite of rage suppressed. Isolde set the lantern on a ledge just outside the bars, its light spilling in golden veins across the threshold, illuminating the shadows where the beast prowled. She did not fear him, not truly. Fear required hope to shatter. She had none left to lose. Lowering herself to the cold stone floor, knees drawn to her chest, she peered into the gloom. His form was a silhouette at first, massive, hunched, the gleam of eyes like embers in a dying fire. He paced, chains rattling in a rhythm that mimicked a heartbeat, too erratic to be alive. Isolde uncorked the pitcher and slid it through the slot, the water sloshing softly. "It's fresh tonight," she murmured, her voice a gentle current in the void. "From the spring under the full moon. It carries the taste of stars, or so the elders claimed." No response came, only a low growl that vibrated through the bars, stirring the fine hairs on her arms. She leaned her head back against the iron, closing her eyes to the chill that nipped at her skin. The wind above howled faintly, tunneling down like a distant weevo, and she began to speak, not commands, but stories plucked from the fragments of her life. Tales of the northern forests, where snow blanketed the pines in silken white, and wolves sang to the deusa under veils of aurora. She spoke of a girl who once dreamed of a bond forged in fire, only to find her path in the quiet mending of broken things. As the hours waned, the growls softened to ragged breaths, the pacing slowed. Isolde sang then, a lullaby from her pack's lore, her voice threading through the dark like silver mist, words of lost moons and redeemed shadows. The chains fell still, and in that fragile truce, she felt the first stir of something unnamed, not pity, but recognition. In the depths where light feared to linger, two exiles circled each other, bound by silence and the inexorable pull of what might yet be. Yet dawn crept nearer, its pale fingers prying at the cracks, and Isolde wondered if mercy was merely another chain or the key to shattering them all. The frost-kissed bars between them gleamed like the fangs of a forgotten god, separating Isolde's fragile vigil from the shadowed maelstrom within. Night after night, she returned, her body a vessel for the unyielding cold that seeped from the stone, wrapping around her like the arms of an indifferent lover. The citadel's depths whispered secrets of betrayal, counselors who had bartered souls for supremacy, turning warriors into weapons with elixirs brewed in silver cauldrons under eclipsed moons. Isolde had gleaned fragments from the guards' hushed tales. The beast had once been a king among alphas, his commands echoing across the silver peaks like thunder, until the wars of the borderlands shattered him. Now, he was a relic of that carnage, his mind a battlefield where rage reigned unchallenged. She settled against the bars once more, the iron biting through her cloak, a sharp reminder of boundaries she dared not cross. The lantern's flame danced erratically, casting rivulets of gold across the cell floor, where straw clung to dark stains like memories refusing to fade. Isolde's fingers traced the runes etched into the metal, ancient wards invoking the Deusa's mercy, though mercy felt as distant as the sun in these eternal twilights. Her breath formed fragile clouds, each one carrying the faint scent of pine from the herbs she crushed in her palm, a ritual to ground herself against the encroaching dread. Tonight, the air hummed with a different tension, thicker than the musk of confined fury. The beast's pacing had ceased entirely, replaced by a stillness that prickled her skin as if the very shadows held their breath. Isolde slid the pitcher through the slot, the water's surface rippling like liquid moonlight. "Drink if you can," she said softly, her voice weaving through the gloom like a thread of silver. No growl answered. Instead, a low rumble stirred from the far corner, not of threat, but of something deeper, recognition, perhaps, or the first fracture in the wall of madness. Curiosity warred with the instinctual pull in her chest, a warmth blooming unbidden amid the chill. Omegas were attuned to such currents, their senses laced with the Deusa's subtle gifts, but Isolde had long schooled hers into silence, fearing the vulnerability it exposed. She leaned closer, peering into the dimness. And there he was, not the hulking silhouette of legend, but a form half revealed by the lantern's glow. Broad shoulders corded with muscle strained against the chains, their links groaning like the wind through iced pines. His furred hide bore the scars of alchemy, jagged lines glowing faintly blue where the council's poisons had seeped into his veins, a map of torment etched in sapphire fire. Eyes the color of storm-tossed seas fixed on her, no longer feral embers, but fractured mirrors, reflecting a soul clawing its way back from the abyss. Fear coiled in her gut, sharp as a winter thorn, yet it mingled with an inexplicable draw, the same instinctive tether that had once promised safety in a mate's claim, now twisted toward this broken king. He did not lunge or snarl. Instead, he shifted forward on bloodied knees, the chains dragging in a dirge that echoed her own hidden wounds. Isolde's heart stuttered, the rhythm syncing with the distant howl of winds above, as if the mountain itself mourned their shared exile. "Who are you?" she whispered, the question slipping free despite the warnings etched in her mind. Never engage, never provoke. But the words hung in the air, a bridge extended into the void. A tremor ran through him, his massive frame shuddering as if the chains bound not just flesh, but fragments of self. He lifted his head, muzzle parting in a ragged exhale that carried the copper tang of old blood and the wild earthiness of untamed forests. For the first time, his gaze held not blind rage, but a piercing clarity, a glimpse of the alpha he had been, etched with the weight of duties forsaken and lives extinguished in his fury's wake. Isolde felt it then, the instinctive bond flickering like torchlight on snow, a pull toward healing, toward the redemption she had denied herself. Yet she recoiled inwardly, rationalizing it as pity, as the delusion of an omega starved for connection. He was the beast, destroyer of packs, not a soul deserving of her fragile light. He strained against the bonds, the runes flaring in protest, and a guttural sound escaped him, not a roar, but a plea woven into the growl. Isolde's hand hovered near the slot, trembling, the scent of the spring water mingling with his, salt and storm, a elixir more potent than any ward. The connection denied itself in her thoughts. This was duty, nothing more, a vigil to stave off his madness until the dawn claimed her. But as his eyes bored into hers, holding the melancholy of a king dethroned by his own hand, she wondered if the deuce's threads wove not chains, but destinies intertwined in the heart of the storm. The night deepened, the lantern's flame guttering as if exhausted by their silent communion. Isolde sang again, her voice a balm against the rising tide of his unrest, notes curling like smoke from a hidden fire. The chains quieted, his breathing steadied, and in that fragile interlude, fear yielded to curiosity's quiet flame. Yet the citadel's shadows pressed closer, whispers of approaching footsteps echoing from the corridors, guards or something more treacherous, drawn by the stirrings below. She rose slowly, gathering her lantern, the weight of unspoken choices settling like fresh snow upon her shoulders. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The approaching footsteps echoed like the tolling of a funeral bell through the citadel's veins, sharp and deliberate against the stone, shattering the fragile hush Isolde had woven with her song. She froze, lantern clutched in her fist, its flame trembling as if sensing the shift in the air, a metallic edge sharpening the musk of the cell, laced now with the acrid bite of oiled leather and steel. Guards, but not the usual rotation. These moved with purpose, their boots grinding frost into powder. Voices murmuring low commands that slithered through the gloom like serpents. Isolde's pulse quickened, a wild drum beneath her ribs sinking with the beast's ragged breaths beyond the bars. She had heard tales from the upper halls, council enforcers, shadows of the alchemists who had forged him into this torment, returning under cover of night to probe his fractures, to harvest the rage they had unleashed for their endless wars. They came not for mercy, but for mastery, injecting vials of shimmering blue serum that reignited the madness, testing how far a king's will could bend before it broke anew. Tonight, their scent carried something fouler, betrayal's rot, a rival alpha's ambition woven into the council's decree, seeking to claim the beast's power as his own, or end it forever. She pressed her back to the bars, the iron cold as a lover's rejection, her free hand instinctively reaching toward the slot where the pitcher lay abandoned. "Stay still," she whispered to the shadows within, her voice a threadbare veil over the fear coiling in her throat. The beast's eyes, those storm-lashed seas, locked onto hers through the dimness, no longer fractured but fierce, a guardian's gleam piercing the veil of his chains. He did not growl. Instead, his massive form shifted, muscles rippling under scarred hide, positioning himself as a bulwark between her and the cell's heart. The chains clinked softly, a warning rattle, as if he understood the peril converging upon them both. The gate groaned open, admitting 3 figures cloaked in gray steel and fur-trimmed pauldrons, their faces hooded against the chill, but eyes glinting with predatory hunger. The lead enforcer, a beta with a jaw like chiseled granite, bore the council's sigil, a crescent moon pierced by thorns, emblazoned on his breastplate. Flanking him were 2 alphas, their scents thick with dominance and the faint, sickly sweet residue of the serum. "Fair win," the beta snarled, his gaze raking over her like frostbite. "You're not to be here past curfew. Step aside, the beast stirs. We come to quiet him." Isolde rose slowly, her knees protesting the stone's bite, positioning her body to shield the slot. The air thickened with tension. The wind from above howling in sympathy, tunneling down to whip at the torch flames and scatter embers like fallen stars. She felt the beast's presence at her back, a heat radiating through the bars that warred with the encroaching cold, a primal assurance that this exile, this weapon, would not let harm claim her without a fight. Empathy stirred unbidden, a warmth unfurling in her chest like the first thaw after endless winter. He was no monster, but a mirror to her own chains, the rejection that had left her adrift now forging an unlikely alliance in the face of greater tyranny. "I am his guardian," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs, drawing on the quiet strength she had honed in solitude. "By the Deuce's grace, no one enters without cause." The words tasted of defiance, a spark she had thought extinguished with her pack's dismissal. The beta laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the walls, but his eyes narrowed at the unnatural stillness from the cell. No feral snarls to greet them, only the low thrum of restrained power. One of the alphas stepped forward, vial in hand, its contents glowing the same sapphire as the scars marring the beast's flesh. "The council tires of this farce," he growled, his voice laced with the envy of one who craved such might. "He's a liability, a relic of failed experiments. Tonight, we end it, or bend it to serve." He lunged toward the bars, but the beast erupted then, not in blind rage, but calculated fury. A roar that shook the foundations, chains straining as he hurled his bulk against the iron, the runes flaring in protest. The vibration hummed through Isolde's bones, a shield of sound that forced the intruders back, their faces paling under the onslaught. In that moment, protection flowed both ways, his raw power a barrier against their advance. Her presence, the anchor that tempered his storm into precision. She did not flee. Instead, she pressed her palm to the bars, whispering urgently through the slot, "Not yet. Hold for me." The contact sent a jolt through her, the instinctive bond deepening, empathy blooming into something visceral, a tether of shared wounds, his guilt over lives lost in madness, echoing her shame of perceived weakness. The alphas recoiled, the beta cursing as the vial shattered against the stone, its blue essence hissing into steam that reeked of forgotten oaths. They retreated, footsteps fading into the corridors like defeated echoes, but the air lingered heavy with their threat, the council's grasp tightening, a common enemy binding 2 outcasts in fragile solidarity. Isolde sank back to the floor, breath shuddering, the lantern's light now a sanctuary amid the settling dust. The beast's eyes met hers again, softer now, the storm receding to reveal depths of melancholy and unspoken gratitude. She offered the water once more, her fingers brushing the slot's edge as he drank, the simple act weaving their fates tighter. In the silence that followed, curiosity yielded to trust, the chill yielding to the warmth of possibility. Yet doubt gnawed at her edges. Was this bond redemption, or merely another illusion in the citadel's web of deceit? As the night waned, the wind's weavos softened to a lullaby, and Isolde wondered if strength lay not in solitude, but in choosing to stand with the broken, even as shadows of betrayal loomed ever closer. The lantern's flame had steadied, a quiet sentinel in the aftermath, its golden glow pooling on the stone like spilled honey amid the frost. Isolde sat with her back to the bars, the iron's chill seeping into her spine, a constant whisper of the boundaries that defined her world. The intruders' retreat lingered in the air, their scents fading like smoke from a doused fire, steel, serum, and the sour tang of thwarted ambition. Yet the cell felt smaller now, charged with the residue of their shared defiance, as if the mountain itself had drawn a breath and held it, waiting for what came next. Her hands trembled faintly as she recorked the pitcher, the spring water's cool surface rippling with the echo of her pulse. Doubt coiled in her chest, a serpent born of too many rejections. The pack's averted eyes, the alpha who had deemed her unworthy, the citadel's cold indifference. This warmth between her and the beast, it was illusion surely, a desperate weaving of shadows to fend off the void. But as she turned to peer through the slot, his eyes met hers again, no longer storm-tossed but deep pools reflecting the lantern's light, flecked with silver like moonlight on fresh snow. In them, she saw not the feral destroyer of tales, but a king stripped bare, his melancholy a mirror to her own hollowed heart. He shifted closer, the chains dragging in a low, mournful cadence, their links etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue, mirroring the scars lacing his hide. Isolde's breath caught. Those marks were no mere wounds, but veins of the council's alchemy, glowing with an otherworldly fire that hummed against her skin, even through the bars. She had always sensed it, in the way her songs quieted his rage, in the instinctive pull that defied reason, an Omega's gift buried deep since her exile, a subtle weave of the Deuce's threads that mended what war had torn. But she had never named it, never trusted its flicker, fearing it would mark her as more broken than she already was. Tonight, it stirred unbidden, a warmth blooming from her core like the first ember in a blizzard's heart. As his massive hand extended toward the slot, palm upturned in a gesture of raw vulnerability, Isolde felt the gift uncoil, a soft luminescence gathering in her veins, invisible yet potent, threading through the air between them like silken mist. It was the Pathfinder's touch, the hidden lore of Omegas who guided lost souls through madness and shadow, revealing paths where only despair tread. Her pack had whispered of such women, vessels of the moon's mercy, but none had claimed her for it. They saw only quiet, not power. The air shimmered faintly, the runes on his chains dimming as her essence reached him, soothing the sapphire fire in his scars until it cooled to a gentle azure glow. He shuddered, a deep rumble escaping his throat, not rage, but release, as fragments of memory surfaced like ice breaking under spring's thaw. Visions flooded his mind, unbidden. Battlefields slick with blood under crimson moons, the council's silver needles piercing his flesh, stripping away command and clarity until only fury remained. And beneath it all, a scent, hers, woven into his dreams even in the depths of oblivion, an anchor he had never named. Isolde gasped as the connection deepened, her gift manifesting fully now, a bridge of light and instinct that laid bare his soul to hers. She saw it all in flashes. Calum Rykor, once Alpha King of the Silver Peaks, betrayed by the very council he had sworn to protect, their experiments a punishment for questioning their endless wars. Guilt etched his every recollection. The lives lost to his unleashed rage, packs shattered under his claws, a throne forsaken in the haze of torment. Yet amid the carnage, a prophecy from the lunar temples, A Pathfinder Omega, marked by rejection's fire, would calm the beast and reclaim the king's destiny, forging redemption not through conquest, but through chosen mercy. "You're the one," he rasped, his voice emerging like gravel underfoot, rough and unused, the first words to breach the silence of years. The sound vibrated through the bars, stirring the wind's distant weavos into harmony, as if the Deusa herself approved. Isolde's heart stuttered, the warmth of her gift surging in response, illuminating the cell in a subtle prismatic haze, white frost yielding to red embers of healed wounds, gray shadows softening to blue depths of understanding. Caelim's eyes widened, the fractured mirrors clearing as recognition dawned. He strained forward, chains groaning but holding, his gaze locking onto her with the intensity of a revelation carved in stone. "Mate," he whispered, the word a sacred incantation, carrying the weight of fates intertwined long before their meeting. It was no claim of possession, but an acknowledgement of destiny's weave, the Omega who had sat night after night, her voice a lifeline through the abyss, was the key to his return. Her gift had not just calmed the rage, it had unlocked the cage of his mind, revealing that she alone could guide him from weapon to king, from guilt to grace. Tears pricked Isolde's eyes, hot against the chill, as the bond solidified, a visceral pull that rationalized away her doubts. Fear warred with awe. This was no gentle romance born of moonlit dances, but a tragic unveiling, her hidden power thrusting her into a destiny she had never sought. The Citadel's betrayals loomed larger now. The Council's enforcers would sense this shift, their ambitions clashing against the Deuce's will. Yet in his gaze, she saw her own reflection. No longer the rejected shadow, but the light that redeemed the fallen. The lantern flickered, casting their silhouettes in eternal dance as the night deepened into possibility's fragile dawn. Isolde pressed her hand to the bars, feeling the pulse of his renewed heart through the iron, and wondered if mercy's crown was forged in such revelations, or if it demanded a price, yet unpaid. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the weight of Caelim's whispered mate hung in the air like frost-laden mist, a revelation that thawed the barriers between them, but ignited a deeper chill in Isolde's veins. She withdrew her hand from the bars, the iron's bite lingering on her skin like a brand as the cell's shadows seemed to thicken, pressing in with the inevitability of a gathering storm. The lantern's flame sputtered, casting erratic patterns across the runes, now dimmed to a serene azure, no longer warring against her gift's gentle weave. Yet peace was fleeting in these depths. The Citadel's heart pulsed with secrets, and the Deuce's threads, once hidden, now pulled taut, drawing forth the ghosts of betrayals long buried. Dawn's pallor had barely crested the mountain's rim when the footsteps returned. Not the enforcer's stealthy tread, but a procession that echoed like thunder rolling through iced canyons. Isolde rose, her body aching from the night's vigil, the woolen cloak heavy with accumulated frost that melted in slow rivulets down her arms. She could scent them before they appeared, the sharp tang of authority mingled with the earthy musk of her former pack, a bouquet of pine resin and hearth smoke that twisted her gut with unwelcome memory. The High Council had summoned them. She knew. Whispers of the beast stirring had reached the upper halls, and with it the political machinations that thrived on such unrest. Betrayal was the Citadel's lifeblood, and Caelim's partial redemption threatened the fragile balance of power. The gate swung open with a groan that mimicked the wind's mournful howl, admitting a cadre of figures cloaked in silver-furred mantles and etched armor, their eyes gleaming with the cold calculation of wolves circling a wounded stag. At their forefront strode Lord Thorn Blackwood, the rival alpha whose ambition had fueled the Council's wars, his frame broad and unyielding, scars from border skirmishes mapping his jaw like lightning across a stormy sky. Beside him walked Eirik, Isolde's former intended, the one who had rejected her in the great hall 3 winters past, his gaze now laced with feigned concern, the scent of guilt faint but unmistakable beneath his dominant aura. They were not here for reunion, but reclamation, to confront the past incarnate in Caelim's chains, and to sever the bond that dared challenge their dominion. Isolde, Eirik said, his voice a low rumble that once promised protection, but now rang hollow, like echoes in an empty cavern. He stepped forward, the torchlight gilding his features in harsh gold, revealing the lines of doubt etched deeper since her exile. The council bids you stand aside, the beast, Caelem Rykor. His madness stirs again. We've come to end it, for the good of the Pax. His eyes flicked to the cell, avoiding hers, the rejection's wound reopening in her chest, a sharp pang that tasted of blood and forgotten oaths. Behind him, Thorn's lips curled in a predatory smile, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade forged in lunar silver, its edge whispering of sacrifices demanded by the Deuce's name. From the cell came a growl, deep and resonant, vibrating through the stone like the mountain's own fury. Caelem surged against his bonds, the chains singing their dirge anew, runes flaring in protest as his eyes, now clear, storm blue and fierce, locked on the intruders. Isolde felt the pull of their bond intensify, a visceral thread that flooded her with his memories. Thorn's treachery in the war councils, the alchemist's needles plunged at his command, turning a king's resolve into ravening chaos to eliminate a rival for the throne. And Eirik, complicit in the silence, his ambition veiled as loyalty, profiting from the experiments that shattered Caelem, while casting Isolde adrift to hide his own inadequacies. She positioned herself before the bars, the lantern at her feet casting her shadow long and defiant, a silhouette woven from moonlight and resolve. The air grew thick with scents clashing, Thorn's iron dominance, Eirik's wavering pine, Caelim's wild storm, and the wind from above tunneled down, whipping her hair like banners in battle. "End it?" she echoed, her voice steady, laced with the poetic cadence of her nighttime songs, now turned to steel. "You've forged him into this, layer by layer, with your vials and your vows. The Deuce does not crown betrayal with mercy's blade." Her gift hummed within, a subtle luminescence gathering in her palms, ready to shield or to reveal. But she held it in check, the choice moral and raw. Unleash it to free him, risking war's crimson tide, or withhold, preserving a fragile freedom born of restraint. Thorn laughed, a bark that chilled the frost on the walls, stepping closer until his breath fogged the air between them. The Omega speaks of gods, while her king grovels in filth. Rykor was a threat, a relic of old glories, questioning our borders, our expansions. We broke him to save the realm. His eyes raked over her, lingering on the slot where Caelim's hand had reached, recognition dawning in their depths. "And you, the rejected whisperer, do you fancy yourself his redeemer? Step aside or join him in the chains." Eirik shifted uneasily, his gaze meeting hers at last, pleading silently for the past's erasure, but Isolde saw the truth her gift unveiled, his complicity, the letters he'd penned to the council, trading her exile for favor, fearing her quiet insight might expose his frailties. Caelim's roar shattered the tension, a visceral wave that hurled Thorn back a step, the chains straining to their limit as blue fire licked his scars. Isolde's heart tore between them, the love blooming in their bond, a redemption that demanded forgiveness for the unforgivable, and the freedom of walking away, leaving the Citadel's webs to ensnare another. "Choose," she whispered to herself, the word a philosophy etched in blood. What was strength, if not mercy amid the storm? To forgive Eirik's betrayal might chain her to silence. To free Caelem could unleash war, packs clashing under blood moons. Her hands stained with the lives his rage might reclaim. Eric reached for her arm, his touch a ghost of what might have been, but she recoiled, the wind howling in approval as her gift flared, a soft barrier of light that pushed him away, illuminating the cell in prismatic hues. Thorn drew his blade, the silver singing against the stone, and the confrontation crested, past and present colliding in a maelstrom of choice. Isolde's breath came ragged, the cold biting deep as she faced the moral precipice, love as war's harbinger or freedom's lonely path. The Deusa's moon, filtering through cracks above, bathed them in silver, a spiritual judgment waiting to unfold while Caelim's eyes implored her, not for vengeance, but for the grace only she could grant. In that suspended breath, the air thrummed with unspoken dilemmas, the fire of possibility warring with the ice of consequence, and Isolde wondered if redemption's price was etched in the scars they all bore, or if it lay in the courage to break them all. The silver blade in Thorn's grip caught the moon's fractured light filtering through the citadel's cracks, its edge a cold promise etched against the gathering shadows. Isolde stood unmoving, the wind's howl a choral underscore to the standoff, whipping her cloak like the tattered banners of forgotten wars. Her gift pulsed within her, a living current now fully awakened, threading through her veins with the subtle force of lunar tides. White and unyielding, it formed an invisible veil around the bars, shielding Caelim's form from the intruder's avarice. Yet the power came at a cost, drawing from her own hidden reserves, each surge leaving a hollow ache in her chest, as if the Deusa exacted payment in stolen breaths. Iric's hand hung suspended in the air where she had recoiled, his fingers curling into a fist that betrayed the tremor of regret. Or was it fear? His scent, once a comforting hearth in her memories, now soured with the residue of complicity, mingling with the cell's musk of earth and restrained storm. "Isolde, please," he murmured, the words fracturing like thin ice underfoot. "This isn't you, the pack. We thought you lost to the wilds. Come back with us, leave this madness behind." His eyes, gray as storm clouds, pleaded for absolution. But she saw the truth unveiled by her gift, the letters sealed with his mark, dispatched to the council in the dead of night, trading her exile for a seat at Thorn's table. He had chosen ambition over her quiet strength, fearing the Omega who might one day illuminate his shadows. Thorn's laugh cut through the tension, sharp as the blade he twirled, its silver singing a low dirge against the stone. "Listen to the whelp," he sneered, his voice a gravelly thunder that echoed off the frost-veined walls. Broad and scarred, he embodied the council's iron creed, power not earned but seized through betrayal's blade. His gaze raked over Caelim's silhouette, the Alpha King's form taut against the chains, muscles coiling like serpents in winter's grip. The blue scars on Caelim's hide flickered in response, no longer dormant but alive with the echo of alchemical fire, a testament to Thorn's hand in the experiments that had stripped a rival of throne and sanity. Rykor was always too noble for this realm, questioning the wars, the expansions into the borderlands. We gave him purpose, as a weapon. And you, little Pathfinder, think your whispers can undo what the Deusa herself ordained? The word struck her like a lash. How had he known? Whispers from the enforcers, perhaps, or the council's spies woven into every shadow. Isolde's heart clenched, the bond with Caelim surging in protest, a visceral warmth that flooded her senses, carrying his guilt like a river of molten lead. She felt it all, the battlefields where his claws had rent flesh under induced rage, the packs scattered like leaves in a blizzard, the throne room where Thorn's ambition had first poisoned the air with promises of glory. Yet beneath the carnage lay Caelim's core, unbroken by the serum's curse. A king who had chosen mercy once, sparing Thorn's life in a border clash, only to be repaid with chains and madness. Her gift amplified it, revealing the prophecy's full weave, the rejected Omega, cast adrift by a false mate's fear, destined to guide the fallen back to grace, not through vengeance, but through the hard forge of forgiveness. Calem's growl deepened, a resonant quake that rattled the lantern at her feet, its flame leaping in wild defiance. He strained forward, the chain's runes blazing azure, but his eyes, locked on hers, held no feral command, only a silent entreaty. Choose us, not the storm they offer. The air thickened with clashing scents, Thorn's iron dominance cloying like bloodied snow. Eric's pine laced with desperation, Calem's wild essence a cleansing gale that stirred the straw on the cell floor. Isolde's breath came in shallow bursts, the cold nipping at her exposed skin, each inhale tasting of salt and stone, the metallic tang of impending violence. "Forgiveness is no chain," she said, her voice emerging poetic and resolute, a cadence honed in solitary nights under auroras. It wove through the gloom like mist off the sacred spring, carrying the weight of her own rebirth, from rejected shadow to the Deusa's vessel. "It's the blade that severs the past's hold. You've built your realm on broken oaths, Thorn, experiments that turned a king to beast, exiles that silenced truths like mine. Eric, you cast me out to hide your frailty, but the moon sees all." Her gift flared subtly, a prismatic shimmer illuminating Eric's face, forcing him to confront the visions she projected. His hand on the quill, the council's gold, in exchange for her freedom, the nights he had lain awake with the echo of her unspoken pleas. Eric staggered back, color draining from his features, the wind howling in symphony as if the mountain judged him. Thorn's snarl twisted into fury, blade raised in an arc that cleaved the air, aimed not at her, but at the bars, to shatter the runes and reignite Calem's curse with a hidden vial at his belt. "Then die with your delusions," he roared, lunging forward, the silver edge whistling toward the iron. Isolde's choice crystallized in that heartbeat. Love as redemption's proof, not a gentle crown, but a gauntlet thrown against tyranny. She thrust her palms outward, the Pathfinder's light erupting in a radiant barrier, white-hot and unyielding, slamming into Thorn like a glacial wave. The impact hurled him against the wall, blade clattering to the stone, his body crumpling amid scattering embers from a toppled torch. Eric froze, torn between flight and the moral abyss yawning before him, his eyes wide with the revelation of his own betrayal's cost. Calem's chains groaned in response, the runes cracking under the surge of her power intertwined with his will, fragments of iron falling like shed scales. But victory's thrill soured swiftly. Blood trickled from Thorn's temple, staining the frost red, a visceral reminder that mercy's path often tread through crimson snow. Eric knelt beside his fallen ally, torn between loyalty and the grace she offered, while alarms began to toll faintly from the upper halls, the council's full wrath descending. Isolde sagged against the bars, the bond with Calem a sustaining fire amid her exhaustion, his presence a promise of union forged in trial. Yet doubt lingered, a spiritual thorn. Had she chosen love, or merely invited war's greater maw? The moon's light strengthened through the cracks, bathing the scene in silver benediction as the wind carried distant weavos, packs stirring, destinies converging in the night's unforgiving embrace. The cell's air hummed with the aftermath's fragile truce, but Isolde knew the precipice they balanced upon demanded one final leap, sacrifice or surrender, healing or the abyss's call. The alarms tolled like the Deusa's solemn dirge, reverberating through the citadel's frozen arteries, summoning the council's iron legions from their shadowed perches. Isolde leaned against the bars, her body a vessel drained by the Pathfinder's surge, each breath a labored draw against the chill that clawed deeper now, unyielding as the mountain's core. The wind howled in furious crescendos, tunneling from the peaks above to whip the cell into a maelstrom of scattered straw and flickering torchlight, embers swirling like lost souls seeking harbor. Blood from Thorn's wound pooled on the stone, a deep crimson stain that mirrored the scars etched across Calem's hide. blue veins pulsing with the remnants of alchemy's curse, now tempered by her light into a subdued azure glow, like veins of sapphire under thawing snow. Eric knelt beside the fallen lord, his hands hovering uncertainly over the rival's still form, the air thick with the copper tang of blood and the acrid bite of shattered vials. His eyes, fractured by the visions her gift had unveiled, lifted to hers, raw with the weight of truths long buried. "Isolde, what have you done?" he whispered. Not accusation, but plea, his voice cracking like thin ice over a hidden chasm. The rejection that had once hollowed her now felt distant, a faded echo swallowed by the bond thrumming between her and Calum, a visceral warmth that anchored her amid the encroaching chaos. She saw his choice mirrored in Irik's gaze, the freedom of denial, turning back to the pack's familiar chains, or the precipice of confession, risking all for a mercy he had denied her. Thorn stirred with a guttural groan, his massive frame convulsing as he pushed to his knees, blade forgotten in the frost, his eyes blazing with undimmed ambition. "You think this ends here?" he snarled, blood streaking his jaw like war paint under a blood moon. "The Council will raise this pit. Rykor remains our weapon, or our corpse." He lunged clumsily toward the bars, fingers clawing at the iron, but Calum's presence loomed larger, his growl a seismic rumble that shook loose more chain fragments, the runes splintering like brittle bone. The Alpha King's form pressed close, his heat seeping through the metal to envelop Isolde, a shield woven from storm and salt, his melancholy gaze holding hers with unspoken promise. "We choose together." The footsteps of the approaching enforcers echoed nearer, a thunderous cadence that drowned the wind's wail, their scents flooding the corridor, steel and serum, dominance laced with the rot of enforced loyalty. Isolde's heart pounded in sync with Calum's, the bond a river of fire and ice, carrying his fragmented thoughts. Memories of thrones claimed in mercy's name, wars waged not for glory, but survival. The guilt that had chained him deeper than iron. Her gift, the Deuce's hidden weave, surged anew, not as barrier but bridge. Tendrils of luminous mist coiling from her palms to encircle the bars, seeping into the runes until they glowed white-hot, the final cracks spiderwebbing across the metal. Freedom or war? The dilemma clawed at her soul. Unleash him fully, and his rage might consume the citadel in crimson atonement, staining her hands with the blood of those who served blindly. Withhold, and they both remained prisoners. Love a quiet grave beneath the moon's indifferent watch. Faith warred with despair in her chest, the cold nipping at her skin like spectral fangs. Each exhale a cloud that mingled with Calum's ragged breaths. "What is strength?" she murmured, the words a philosophy born of exile's forge. "If not choosing compassion over the blade?" Eric rose then, torn and trembling, his hand extending not to her, but to Thorn, pulling the rival back as the first enforcers breached the gate, armored betas and alphas, vials at the ready, their eyes widening at the scene, the fallen lord, the glowing chains, the Omega radiant in her quiet power. Thorn's command barked forth, hoarse but unyielding. "Seize them, the beast stirs, end it now." But Eric hesitated, the moral precipice yawning before him, her gift's light illuminating the path of redemption he had forsaken. In that suspended breath, he turned, voice steady for the first time. "No, the Deuce's will unfolds here. Stand down." Betrayal rippled through the ranks, murmurs of doubt threading the air like silver mist, as Thorn whirled on him, blade reclaimed in a flash of moonlight. The clash erupted, steel on steel, growls and grunts echoing off the walls, blood spraying in arcs that caught the torchlight like rubies on snow. Isolde seized the moment, her palms pressing fully to the bars, the Pathfinder's essence pouring forth in a torrent. White light intertwined with Calum's blue scars, the chains shattering in a cascade of iron shards that sang against the stone, free at last. Caleb emerged, no feral beast but a king reborn, his massive frame unfolding with graceful power. Furred hide rippling under the moon's silver benediction, filtering through the cracks. He did not lunge into rage. Instead, he wrapped her in his arms, the bond sealing in a rush of heat and scent, wild earth and sacred spring, a union that healed the fractures of their souls. Her exhaustion melted into strength, his guilt absolved in the choice of mercy over vengeance. Together, they faced the fray. Caleb's roar, a command that quelled the enforcers, his presence a gravitational force, drawing oaths of loyalty from the wavering, while Isolde's light wove through the chaos, revealing truths. Thorn's treacheries projected in prismatic visions, forcing even his allies to recoil. Thorn fell last, not to claws, but to the weight of exposed sins, his blade clattering as he yielded, bound by chains of his own making. Eric stood amid the settling dust, eyes meeting Isolde's in silent forgiveness granted, his path now one of atonement, turning from the council's shadow to light the pack's rebirth. The alarms faded, the wind softening to a hush as dawn's first pale rays pierced the gloom, bathing the cell in gold-veined frost. Caleb's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the line of her jaw, his voice a low timbre rich with reclaimed soul. Mate, my anchor, my crown. No immediate bliss, but a hard-won union, love as proof forged in sacrifice, their freedom bought with compassion's blade, destinies entwined against the wild's endless call. In that renascimento, the citadel transformed, no longer a prison of ice and betrayal, but a hearth where rejection yielded to revelation, the Deusa's moon witnessing the fallen rise as one. Isolde leaned into him, the chill yielding to warmth, blood and fire symbols of trials past, as distant uivos rose in celebration, packs converging under the thawing sky, redemption's flame kindled eternal. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.